For our top news story, China's stimulus tops $5 trillion as the COVID zero hits the economy. And that apparently dwarfs the stimulus in the United States. For the coronavirus story itself, we need a definite exit from the pandemic. Here's the possible roadmap. In technology, there's an algorithm that's been trained to detect unhappiness on social networks. I wonder what they'll do with that. On climate change, the benchmarks all set records last year, but the benchmarks are going the wrong way. In materials, we can make advanced electronics using water. Interesting. In space, here are 6 countries about to go to the moon: Japan, South Korea, Russia, India, the United Arab Emirates, and they plan to send missions to the moon in the next year. In biology, I didn't know this. A lot I don't know. Cats know the names of other cats that are their friends. And when people are talking about how the cost of living goes up so much, apparently corporate profit accounts for at least 2% of the current inflation rate. Now, memory loss in us old folks. This wasn't really us, it was in mice. Memory loss was reversed using a brain liquid from younger peers in groundbreaking study. And we've talked before about things like, Norm will be interested in this, I expect. So that's what we'll discuss today. And now, Richard, what's this in our top story? The China's stimulus tops $5 trillion as COVID hits the economy.
Now, we know that China is having problems and problems with their economy, and they have to do with their zero COVID approach, which is shutting down its economy and causing it real trouble. And a sign of the trouble, China plans to stimulate its growth by pouring enormous amounts of money into the economy. I actually read 2 different reports. This report here from Bloomberg in the USA said that China was going to stimulate 5.3 trillion. I tried to get that article and it was behind a paywall, and I found another thing from Singapore from the Straits Times, also from Bloomberg there, and it says the stimulus will top $7 trillion. And you know, how much did Biden use in the US? It was $2 trillion, and that seemed to actually help us a lot. So this 7 trillion is roughly a third of the size of China's economy. And so I think this is one example of economics in the modern mode, where countries have figured out if they need more money, then I guess you don't even have to print money. You do it electronically. So it's not like the old days when you had to print money. Now you just change some money somewhere on a computer and all of a sudden you're rich. So anyway, China, if you look at this, China, one of the reasons for it is China plans every year, and one big part of their plan is what they expect the growth rate to be. and China was expecting their growth rate to be 5.5% for the year. And uh, it looks like China's growth rate will be 2% for the year. And so the reason for all this government stimulus is trying to do something to be able to meet their plans. By the way, if China only grows 2% this year, the US is forecast to grow 2.8%. And this would be the first time in about 40 years that the US growth rate was higher than China. So it certainly shows something is going on to China that is affecting their numbers. Also, China suggests that this may not be all. If things go bad in the next few months, they may pump some more stimulus in. Now, whatever they do, though, the amount of money they pump in their economy will be less than they did after the 2008 crash. You know, we all are aware of what that did in the U.S., and most of us are not aware of what that did in China. It was disastrous in China, and had as a result of that, the biggest government stimulus ever in the world. I'm not sure how much it was though. But so anyway, China is in trouble, and China, with their government system to get themselves out of the trouble, they're just moving some decimal points on some computer somewhere, and now they have a lot more money to spend.
Any thoughts?
We see you there, Chad.
I'm here.
Good. Well, if nobody wants to comment on this, Richard, I wonder if you could tell us about the roadmap to get away from the COVID pandemic.
Okay, this continues to be a subject of a great deal of interest, and here we are. Uh, we're 2.5 years into this COVID epidemic, and actually, COVID is still pretty much outrunning our response, and it's getting more transmissible and reaching a level of infectiousness that few pathogens in the history of mankind have ever achieved. And, then in recent months, we've experienced a striking jump in transmissibility with the Omicron variant. The Omicron variant is at least 3 times more infectious than the Delta variant was. And since the Omicron variant has come here, we had the BA2 variant, which was another 30% more transmissible. And then we had the BA2.12.1, which was another 25% more transmissible. And, this indicates that the virus is accelerating its evolution. And I'm not sure that is good for us humans. And, there still are multiple other subvariants with heightened infection rates, including the BA4 and BA5, which are leading a new wave in South Africa. Oh boy. And you might think that all of this would be an urgent call for action, but people are getting tired of the virus, and they're in adopting a policy that we have to live with COVID. And the thing is that if we have to live with COVID, uh, we are not really doing the right things. There in the U.S., Hospitalizations, while they're not spiking before, are up more than 20% in the last couple of weeks. Doesn't sound like it's over to me. And one of the things is the deaths with Delta in the U.S. 23% of the people who died from Delta were vaccinated. With Omicron, it's 42% of the people who have died from Omicron have been vaccinated. Now, this may have only been double vaccinated and their booster may be running low on its power, but it's showing a higher death rate among the vaccinated, and that's certainly a concern. And the with this kind of stuff going on, rather than giving up, uh, this article says that it's time to double down on innovations that have a high likelihood of helping. First on the list is to finish developing these nasal vaccines, especially some that seem to be more resistant to different variations. The nasal vaccines induce mucosal immunity and are a much better first line of defense to block transmission. And there are nasal vaccines late in clinical trials, but there has not been anything like the Operation Warp Speed government support and encouragement to get them released and in the hands of the public. Next is candidate drugs. Uh, there are a number of them in development now, and one has been released, Paxlovid, and it was the fastest small molecule pill program in history and was developed, tested, and released in less than 2 years. It's still not broadly enough available. And there are other such molecules that are in development, but there does not seem to be a big push to get them finished with the development process and available. So, getting these things uh, done and in our hands is an important step. And the third thing is the development of pan coronavirus vaccinations. And again, they have located at least more than 10 neutralizing antibodies that could be at the basis of this, but there is nearly a void in development and testing of the vaccines that are based on this. So, a combination of oral vaccines, more and better drugs, and variant proof coronavirus would likely bring us to a real end of the pandemic. But right now, we don't seem to be doing it. We just want it to be over. So I think for me, this is a case of magical thinking, and I'm not sure it's going to work.
Any thoughts?
Yes, I believe that the process of testing and immediately administering the antiviral medicine is damn effective.
Yes, you saw that with your brother.
Well, that was before,
That was the antibodies.
that was the antibody. But now we have a process in the United States where if you test positive, you're immediately entered into a program
Oh,
of
wow.
antiviral to
Okay,
resolve it.
good,
And that is a very effective process.
good.
Norman, do you have any sense with that process whether it prevents long COVID?
No, the results from COVID of any kind seem to be very unfortunate. But immediately after testing to enter into an antiviral program, at least minimizes the COVID problem.
And probably we'll find out later about long COVID.
We already know the results from COVID, even after people recover from the
Right.
disease, are horrible.
I think we should note that COVID fatigue, once COVID fatigue sets in, it's like any other thing when the public becomes disinterested and wants to just move on and live with it. That's the time that the federal government has a role, and the federal government should take charge of this for the good of the people, whether it's popular or not. That's my 2 cents.
I vote for it.
I would vote.
Chad, I'm interested in your comment. Some of a guy who you probably know, Eric Luria, who sometimes has been on this with us and who's a member of the Unitarian Fellowship. Right now, he's up in the States and he watched our Sunday service and he sent a thing out saying he was horrified that almost everybody he saw on the Zoom Sunday service didn't have a mask on. And then he sent a thing talking about how dangerous it is right now and what we should be doing differently. And I suppose in that question with this kind of fatigue, what do you think our policies in organizations we're involved in here at Lakeside should be because of that?
Well, I noticed that Jalisco has just abolished the masking. And really, I don't think there's much you can do about it. COVID fatigue is just that. People don't want to wear the mask. They're willing to live with it. But I would get back to long-term research and that kind of thing that the federal government needs to do, including the Mexican federal government, to try to get on top of it should it come back. I don't think there's much you can do about COVID fatigue. You shame people into wearing masks. It's just, I don't think anything works.
Chad, the process of testing and then immediately administering an antiviral program is tremendously beneficial.
How would you arrange testing?
I don't know how they've done it in the US, but there's a great movement towards testing and immediate antiviral treatment.
Because it seemed to me that in the early days, there was more testing and that now they stopped requiring it to a great extent. Is that true?
I think that's true. I don't think you don't require to show a test to get on an airplane, or, well, maybe you did the last time I flew. But I think testing is the most important thing that can be done now. And I'm not sure if the home tests, which I have right here in my cupboard, I'm not sure how good they are for these variants that we have coming up. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm. And that's hard to know because the good thing is
now we have treatments.
Right.
Remember 2 years ago,
right,
there was no damn treatment. You got COVID, you died, or maybe you survived. Now we have treatments.
Now, some of this is making me feel unhappy. But apparently, according to Richard, we now have an algorithm that can train to can detect my unhappiness if I'm on social networks. And of course, Richard wonders what they're going to do with this if they find out I'm unhappy. But tell us about this algorithm to detect unhappiness.
Not meaning to interrupt, but I love Fred's segues.
Yes, I know he does so well.
It's getting better as time goes on too.
Yes, yes, it shows how if you use a skill, you improve at it. And so here, researchers have developed an algorithm that can identify the basic needs of computer users from the text and images they share on social networks. Now, what the experts hope is this tool will help psychologists diagnose possible mental problems. What is not covered in the article, but what I am sure is this technology will find its way into the data they collect about us that is used to generate the ads that we see on our computer, because how we react emotionally to things and what we want to buy, I think, are connected. And one of the geniuses of the American marketing system is to be able to make use of all of that stuff to move the merchandise. You know, that's what's important in America, is moving the merch. Anyway, so here they can do it with what you put on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And it's based on William Glasler's choice theory, which says there are 5 basic human needs: survival, power, freedom, belonging, and fun. I'm glad to hear fun is one of our needs, because I like to have fun. And how we present ourselves in social media is a real good indicator of what our underlying needs are. And so this research team has used 2 years developing a deep learning model, and it uses multimedia data such as images and text and biography and geolocation. And what they did to kind of simplify the problem is they have developed an algorithm that identified the content of images and categorized it with different tags based on tags that have been presented by the psychologists that play to these 5 basic needs. And they say the experiments show promising accuracy and between visual and textual cues, and that's encouraging if you're getting 2 different bits of data that point in the same way, and they identify with some things more than one need that is being expressed by the image. An example they gave is, imagine a cyclist riding up a mountain, and at the top of the mountain, they can either snap a selfie of them at the top of the mountain, or they can choose a picture of the group that came up the mountain. And of course, if it's a selfie of them at the top of the mountain, they think that's related to their need for power. And if it's the picture of the others, that's related not only for fun, but for their need for belonging. And so through this, they are developing more ways to figure out how you are wired without you knowing that they're figuring out or knowing that they're watching you. And it's just going to make the ads that you see on your computer better, and I hope it makes my YouTube video feed better. Gee, I'm happy when they present something that I'm interested in that I didn't know that I was interested in. Maybe it'll be good. Or maybe it'll just be another way for those advertisers to manipulate us. What do you think?
Any thoughts?
I think the analysis of our social interactions can be quite beneficial. Sure, they can be beneficial to advertisers, but they can be beneficial to us individually too.
How so?
If it can be identified, Richard, that we have psychological issues, happiness issues, whatever, then those can be addressed.
Uh-huh. Now, certainly that's what the scientists were talking about, is the positive view of it. And, maybe I'm just being too cynical here.
But what the hell is a negative view of it? That we receive advertising that we don't wish?
Well,
Hopefully our critical thinking can deal with that to some degree.
could be. To me, the negative is just it's another way for them to manipulate us. And I feel like their ability to manipulate us outstrips some of our ability to resist.
Well, if we can be manipulated to greater happiness or well-being, that doesn't sound like a negative thing.
No, not to me either. Not to me either.
Because while I think these mass shootings and so forth are inconsequential, but at least having the ability to define people that are in trouble is beneficial to society.
It's still that, even with that, to me, there are problems because I can imagine people getting upset when the police come and knock on your door because of stuff you've been posting on Facebook or Instagram, even though they might be saving the lives of the 10 people at the supermarket.
More important that people's psychological issues are addressed. The mass shootings and so forth are inconsequential. When you look at 1 million people who have died from COVID, many of them because they simply would not get vaccinated. 1 million people in the US.
Right.
And how many million, Richard, are we talking about globally?
15 about.
Richard, I wonder if this algorithm would detect my lack of fun and my unhappiness with this next story about climate change benchmark setting records going the wrong way. Tell us about it.
Well, you may have heard that we're in trouble, and this just confirms some of the trouble. I'll just go through this quickly. The worldwide organization, the WMO, has given their report, and it confirms that the past 7 years have seen the warmest such period on record, and that greenhouse gas concentrations have reached a new high and recently hit 420 ppm. Remember when they were saying we got to keep it to 350? I think we missed that goal. Temperature will continue to increase as long as CO2 levels continue to go up. Ocean heat content reached a record high in 2021. Marine species, because of this, are on the move because of the changes in open uh, temperatures. And around the world, particularly in the US and Canadian Northwest, but now in other places like India, are having terrible heat, forest fires, and the worst years ever. And, uh, so the problems continue to go on. And this is, even though there are numerous solutions available that are already identified, what is needed is to have the leaders act with urgency. Study after study has shown that there's plenty we can do. We just have to do it.
Any thoughts?
Too bad John Dewall's not here, because that's one of his favorite topics.
Uh-huh.
But I believe that we have passed the tipping point, the point of no return. And I don't think there's anything that can be done just to stop it from this point on. Even, especially in light of the political feelings about it and lack of ability to put so much money into it. I mean, more than COVID money, you'd need to put, or stimulus money, you'd need to put more trillions. We're talking the $7 trillion mark to make a difference, to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
No more inner combustion engines, no more gasoline, no more fossil fuel burning. I mean, on and on. We can't stop it.
Chad, I still maintain that the Earth has gone through climatic change forever. We may have contributed a lot to it, and some of it may be preventable, but the climate on Earth has changed through time continuously.
We're talking about CO2 in the atmosphere, which is the main contributor. And it's the highest it's ever been in the history of the world.
Or
and
in
it
the
all,
history of mankind, anyway.
History of mankind, history of the world, even.
I think there was a time earlier in one of the environmental catastrophes where the CO2 levels got higher.
Through volcanic thing.
Yes.
It was before my time, but
okay. What do you have? Gray hair.
But I have a chart. I have a chart that goes like this, industrial revolution, up, goes like this, goes like this, goes like this. And that's where we're at now, is up here. And down here was like the year 1500 or 1400.
In terms of the climate in the Earth, the last 500 years is a very small window.
Not when mankind entered into the picture.
And, there's certainly, I've heard what you have said, Norman, from other sources, and I continue to hear from sources that I think are respectable, like, for example, the Geological Society of London, which is a very conservative place, and they've looked at the long-term history of climate and CO2 and stuff like this, and their conclusion is that while the climate has changed before, these changes are primarily due to people putting extra CO2 in the air.
Absolutely.
So anyway, one of the things also I looked at within this, if you look at the amount of CO2 that's in the air, more than half of it came from the coal that we've been burning since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So the coal burning, in fact, is the biggest villain of all.
And it's not just CO2, it's the permafrost melting and
Right,
sending methane into the air. That's caused by CO2.
right.
I mean, it's all man caused. Sea level rise is the highest it's been for since they kept records anyway.
Right,
And
but
it's
that's just recently. Sea levels were a lot higher 10,000 years ago. Or no, they were lower, excuse me, the glaciers. The,
right, but almost any chart you put up, that it goes from sea level is down here to up here. It's raising. I just read the other day. It's raising by, well, it might have been in the article you had, but 3 centimeters a year, something like that. Doesn't seem like a lot, but
right.
over time, it
Over
really
100 years, that's a lot.
that's a lot.
But more grievously is the raise of the methane emissions.
That's
Uh,
certainly the worst part of it. Natural gas,
Yeah,
Yeah, which
the marketing name.
the ocean temperature.
yes, methane versus natural gas. Natural gas sounds so good,
That's
and
right.
we know we're talking about methane.
Anyway, marketing wins again.
Well, Richard, if we want to move on to our material story, this time it's about water. How do you make advanced electronics with water?
Well, the changes are happening within the next generation of photovoltaic devices and semiconductors and LEDs, and it's going to happen through the use of perovskites, which are versatile nanomaterials that have a crystalline structure. And uh, how they have made the perovskites so far for the scientific research are mainly through spin coating that in a vacuum that's like semiconductor processing. So it's not inexpensive and it's not easy. And there had been a problem using water because water is usually kept away from the perovskites because the moisture can lead to defect in the materials and causing them to fall apart. But now they have figured out a simple way to control the growth of the phases of these perovskites by using water in a very controlled way in the process. So now they can generate perovskites that are tuned for the specific application that they need, and they can do it cost effectively. And they do it by changing the ratio of water to solvents during an early stage of the process. And with this, they can grow different kind of perovskites, and they can grow them that where they have precise control. To just test this, they produced a crystalline structure that can uh, use perovskite crystals to detect X-rays. And their initial result was something that worked as good as any of the commercial products that are presently there and better than any other perovskites that they have tried to develop for this purpose. So it looks very promising. And the thing is that it's inexpensive and high volume and mass production. And The perovskites already have shown similar ability as silicon for things like solar panels, and they're much, much cheaper. So we have a new generation coming, and this specific development is going to facilitate it. And besides the X-ray detection, this will impact solar cells and LEDs and photovoltaics and many other areas. Change is coming in the world of optics and solar panels because of these perovskite crystals.
Any thoughts?
I guess I haven't understood yet, Richard. Can you simplify it?
No, perovskites are crystals that are rhombic, that have five sides, and they are microscopic and have, among other things, depending on how they're made, a tunable band gap. It's the band gap that enables the crystal to be used as a semiconductor or an solar cell. And what they are able to do here by fiddling with the chemical composition as they're starting it is they can tune the band gap for what you want to use it for. So they can make it tuned for visible light, for example, for the solar cell.
Well, I got more out of that than I did the article.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's just the background that you need to make it have any sense. And I've only got that because I've been reading this stuff every week and trying to figure it out myself.
Richard, a number of the articles we've been talking about make us want to be somewhere else, whether it's the pandemic or happiness or climate change. So why doesn't everyone, not only 6 countries, want to get to the moon? But why are they going, and what's the implication?
Well, the moon is going to be one of the most popular destinations in the solar system the next year. And there are at least 7 missions that are headed there from India, Japan, Russia, South Korea, the United Arab Emirates, the United States, along with a couple of companies. So they're all headed to the moon this year. Leading it is the USA Artemis program, and this is planned as the first step toward sending astronauts to the moon. So that's going to get the most publicity. Science isn't the only thing that's driving this. A lot of the missions are countries signaling their growing ambition and their ability, and these commercial players are trying to start up their space business. One of the missions is the South Koreans' Pathfinder lunar orbiter, and it is the first step to secure South Korea's space capability. It also has a pretty heavy science content and is probably the most science content of any of the missions this year. Japan's SLIM, the smart lander for investigating the moon, is gonna attempt a pinpoint landing. So what they're trying to do is to be able to land accurately, and it's also going to be one of the things that gets one of these commercial missions to the moon. India's Chandrayaan 3 is going to try to make up for the failure of the last mission where they tried to get a lander and rover onto the lunar surface and it didn't work. So here, this is India's is a makeup shot. Russia's Luna 25 lander is going to be Russia's first trip to the surface of the moon since the previous lunar landing mission in 1976. So it's been a long time for Russia. And the United Arab Emirates are making their first lunar mission with a rover called Rashid. It's going up on one of these other missions. And it's going to mark another first, which is a pioneering trip to the moon by a commercial mission. They're going to be landing with a Japanese commercial mission with a company, iSpace is the big Japanese company that is trying to get in the space business. Then in the South Korea's orbiting satellite, there are going to be exciting things that come from that. One of them is they have what is called the quote shadow cam, which is a very sensitive visible light camera that was provided by NASA. And they're going to use that to look into the shady areas on the moon, like at the bottom of the craters, trying to look for water. They also, one of the other instruments upon this South Korean satellite will be a magnometer called KMAG, and they're going to use it to study the magnetic field around the moon because we're really confused about the magnetic field. The moon never had a core of liquid iron like the Earth did, and it has a tiny iron core, and they think it's so small that no existing theory can explain how it generated the magnetism. So, what else do we have? We have Russia's mission will be the first mission to reach the lunar poles. And on the commercial side, NASA is supporting a number of companies through its commercial lunar payload services initiative. And the first of these commercial messages will go up on NASA's Artemis program. And it's a race to see which company gets to the moon first. We have iSpace that's going to go up from the Japanese mission, and it says their chief technology officer says that successfully delivering a commercial landing would be a significant scientific achievement and a step towards public-private missions. And it will carry the UAE satellite, the Rashid rover. So there's a lot going on in the moon this year, and countries and companies now look like they're lighting up to try to figure out how to explore and exploit the moon for commercial purposes.
Any thoughts?
Yes, I thought that I had read that the Japanese were exploring the materials available from asteroids within the last year. I think we have some knowledge of the moon, but of the asteroids, it may have very valuable minerals for us.
Sure.
The Japanese seem to be pursuing it, and not NASA, not other space activities.
Except I think Lithuania is or Luxembourg, excuse me, the wrong European little L country. Luxembourg has started a very major uh, mission to explore and exploit the asteroids. They've always been interested in shipping in wealth from other places. And I did say recently one of the asteroids that is being looked at has iron on it, and not just a little iron. If you dollarize it, it's $4 quadrillion worth of iron.
And I understand sending stuff from space to Earth may not require a lot of energy.
That's right, it's downhill.
Are any of these planned missions from other countries and companies manned missions?
No,
They're all unmanned.
it's all unmanned. The U.S. mission is the one that is preparation for manned missions, and that's why it will get more press than the other 5.
Right, because they're one-way missions. They're not planning on any returning.
I think they're still one-way missions. I read in one they are collecting samples. I'm not sure what they're planning on doing with the samples, and I didn't study it that carefully.
Right.
Is somebody regulating the traffic to the moon, I wonder?
I don't think we have to worry about the traffic cop yet.
Well, I can just see a couple of them flying into one another.
I hope not.
No, the traffic issue is with Starlink,
Right.
which now has 2,000 low Earth satellites in orbit, and will have 12,000 low
Yeah.
Earth orbit satellites.
And has plans for another 20,000 besides.
And I can assure you, Starlink has good internet service.
Okay.
Well, Richard, I guess if these missions are unmanned, they'll also be uncatted, and we won't be able to take the advantage of our feline friends. But the next story says how intelligent cats are, that they know the names of other cats that are their friends. Tell us about it.
Well, they've been studying cats, and researchers now believe that cats can recall the names of other cats and human beings based on their names and based on their faces. And so they examined whether cats match familiar faces and names. What they did was cats were presented with a photo of a person on a laptop computer, and before the photo came up, the cats heard a name of a person or another cat they hung out with, or maybe some cats they didn't hang out with, I'm not sure. And what they found was the cats would give attention for a longer time if the name that they heard did not match the face they saw later. And so the scientists assume that this was because the cats were expecting the face to match the name that they heard, and when it didn't, they took longer to figure out what's going on here. And that manifested as paying attention longer to the screen. This, they say, is an evidence that cats are able to do a kind of social learning. Learning the names of other critters is a real sign of that. And they say also, You know, there is a wrong idea about cats. People think that cats do not listen to the people's conversations, but as a matter of fact, they do. We have learned that cats listen carefully to human speech. And these researchers think that humans and cats can get along better if you talk to your cat because cats are interested in this kind of communication. And these people did other studies. Last year, they published a study that showed that cats are able to associate humans with their voices. This year, they saw that they're able to associate humans with their names and their faces. And the scientists are kind of interested in this because if you look at cat ancestors, they do not engage in any of this referential vocal things. As far as they know, they don't call each other names, for example, and they are speculating that the fact that you can see this behavior in domestic cats is a part of the evolutionary selection pressure they've had living with humans. So they do know that the cat knows your name and the cat knows its own name. I wondered if the cats know the dog in your household's name too, but they didn't test that.
Any thoughts?
Well, you know, we have,
I think people that speak to cats or dogs should be examined.
You want to check their social media, huh?
but you know, we have two dogs and one cat in the house. And the cat and one of the dogs like to sleep together in one of those cozy little beds. But she only, or he rather, does it only with the little dog. The bigger dog, uh, you know, they have no problem with each other, but they won't get quite that intimate. Anyway, it's too bad that Sue isn't here because she's back in Toronto, but she is the cat lady of Canada. Did you know that? I mean, that's her specialty. She's a psychologist or psychiatrist that changed to become a veterinarian. And, and so she is the cat lady of Toronto. They have a chief member of 12 people practice.
John, I've always questioned the sanity of psychiatrists.
Yeah, well, anyway, she probably saw before she goes off the deep end. Yeah.
Well, I have known psychiatrists, and the ones that I know got into it to begin with, trying to figure out what's wrong with themselves.
But yeah, oh yes, yeah, I believe that. Yeah. So anyway, but she was gonna be she's gonna try to be here, but on Zoom that is. But I guess she didn't make it.
Okay.
Richard, tell us about corporate profit and how much it's contributing to inflation.
Okay. This is data that was taken from fortune.com. And what they showed was that corporate profits increased 25% in 2021 from 2020. And this is in the US, and this is an increase of just over 2.4% of the GDP. And their conclusion is that excess profits were a significant factor in the inflation in 2021. And when they went through the numbers, the extra profit or the increased profit was more than 500 billion. And if you divided that by the population of the US, it would amount to $1,700 per person in the US. Of course, this profits went to the owners of the companies, not to all the people. And this was not in the article, but I saw another article recently about the creation of new billionaires during this period, and I suspect this is related to the corporate profits. Uh, since the pandemic, since 2020, there were 573 new billionaires. Before this, there were just over 2,000. The number of billionaires in the world during the pandemic increased by more than 27%. I wonder if that's related to the profits being greater by more than 25%.
I think Trump might have something to do with that too.
Any thoughts?
Well,
I think the system of taxing corporate profits rather than taxing the owners of the organizations is terribly flawed. It's double taxation. An investor purchases activities in a corporation. The corporation's profits are taxed, and then subsequently, the investors' profits are taxed. Double taxation.
No, I think because corporations are people. Remember that.
Oh, the corporations are people, and they
Yes,
should be taxed.
right.
And then the investors in those corporations should be further taxed.
Different entity. Those are other people. That's what the law says. But I want to point out that it's not the corporation's fault, that that they're just doing what they're created to do, and that is to make money. And if you want to change it, you have to do it through taxation or some other way. If you want to take the corporate profit away.
There can be differences of opinion.
I'm sure there are. And I want to point out that the stock market, so the corporate profits don't go to the owners, they go to the shareholders, like you pointed out, the shareholders, and are handed out in dividends and other ways. But look at the stock market the last week, and I could have bought another Tesla.
These last couple weeks, one could have bought a lot of Teslas.
Yes.
Well, the stock market goes up and down is the one thing I'm sure of.
Well, most recently, that's not
Down.
the case. It hasn't gone up.
But
Just-
before that, it went up. It just goes
Yeah.
up and down.
Just remember, buy low, sell high.
yeah, right.
That's all you
That
gotta
would
know.
that would be the ideal situation.
Easier said than done. Yep, as an investor, I can tell you, you just don't want to sell these stocks that are doing so great. You want to sell the ones that haven't been doing so great. And the logic, the method is you don't sell the ones that aren't doing great. You sell the ones that are doing great and buy other stuff. But it's hard to do psychologically. If a company is doing great, you want to stick with it. You don't want to sell their stock.
In error.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about the stocks going up and down, but memory loss can go just one way, reversed, in mice, if you use a brain liquid from young mice. Tell us about this.
Well, this is, I think, interesting because it comes after a series of stories about trans uh, moving substances from young mice to old mice. And we've heard it before with blood, and then we've heard it recently with fecal matter, and now uh, we hear it with cerebral spinal fluid. And here they've moved that from young mice to old mice. And when you do it, the new fluid, the fluid is used to help the brain cells clean out their waste and things like this. And this bathes the uh, brain cells with proteins and growth factors and things that are vital for normal development, and the amount of this cerebral spinal fluid reduces as we get older, and it looks like that's a part of aging. And so this therapy opens the door to new treatments and maybe slowing cognitive uh, decline and doing things for dementia. And it the brain aging underlies dementia and other neurodegenerative disease. And with this treatment, then they see memory improvements made in old mice. And the other thing they see that's interesting is a RNA sequencing study showed that this therapy altered the gene expression in the hippocampus, which controls memory. So it looks like it made the memory control center uh, act younger in the mice. And particularly important here is they located a gene, specific gene called FGF17 as being key in this process, identifying, and what they found with that gene is activating, boosting that gene had the same effect on aging as the transfusion of the cerebral spinal fluid. And so this gives them hope for developing a drug that targets this gene and then can do something about this age-related cognitive design that affects about a quarter of the people over 60. So let's see, we have 6 people here. That means 1.5 of us may be having this mental decline. I just hope it's not me. And not only does the study imply FGF17 has a potential for as a therapeutic target, but it also suggests routes of drug administration that will be beneficial in treating dementia.
Any thoughts?
Well, they're not talking about taking the brain fluid from mice and putting it into men, right?
It's not the mice and putting them in men. It's another thing. We need our grandchildren
Yeah.
to go with us to the aging clinic.
Yes.
Right. Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
There is
I thought years ago, we felt that the transfusion of blood from younger people to us had tremendous benefit, but that's not proven to be the case.
Oh no, that still is the case. It's just that it's been hard to develop a market for the kit to strap your grandkid on your back and hook up the transfusions. I tried to get people to market that, but I couldn't find any buyers.
Richard,
noticed-
I have
I
had
noticed-
stories. Is there anywhere in Mexico that we know of where people, in fact, are marketing some of these techniques where you can go and take advantage of some of them?
I bet you can do it in Tijuana, but I don't know of anything specifically.
But several years ago, 5 years ago or so, we accepted the possibility that transfusions of blood from younger people could assist us.
Right. And again, there's good science behind that.
Well, I think we've found a new use for aborted fetuses, though.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, for stem cell activity, of course.
And this is another use. I'm all
Uh-huh.
for it. I'm glad to see that there is something useful out of children after all.
But
Well, you were once a child.
What's that?
You were once a child.
Yeah.
I was too, but I don't remember it.
You're losing
uh-oh,
your memory.
that's maybe cognitive design. It's interesting to me, though, part of what's interesting in this research is they're discovering a very specific gene that has an impact on all of this stuff. And the discovery of that gene, I know, is going to spur an enormous amount of research because the drug companies want to have some daily product that they can sell to all us old people. And so they're going to be looking for their magic bullet.
By subscription.
It seemed like the blood of younger people was the magic bullet for us.
It's just harder. It's a little harder to get access.
But fecal matter shouldn't be nearly as hard.
That's right.
Right.
Fecal matter transfers have been so successful without any doubt.
Well,
I'll be a donor.
We don't want yours. So, Richard, thanks a lot. Thanks to everybody for participating, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.
okay, good show.
Adios. See you next
Adios.
week.
Okay, take care.
Okay, you too.